All right, welcome everybody to the Generation Z podcast. I am Jake Mangle and I'm joined with Matthew Pastrana. And this is going to be our first video that we make, our first podcast, where we're just going to be basically introducing ourselves, and we're going to be going through the different areas of the political field and placing our stances on all the issues. So, Pastrana, do you want to talk a little bit more about the future of the podcast, kind of what we're going to be doing, and the inspiration behind starting this as well?
Yeah, so for sure. So we want to talk about current events, obviously, and then we want to cover some of the bigger issues, give our stances. In this video, we'll just be giving brief descriptions of where we stand, just so everything's clear, and our positions can change. I mean, right now we think we're right on whatever we believe, but that doesn't mean we can't change in the future. But yeah, we want to talk about important issues such as gun rights, abortion, fiscal policy, healthcare, military spending, immigration, just to cover a few. But if you have any other ideas, make sure you let us know down in the comments. But Mango, you want to give a little introduction to who you are?
Yeah, so I would classify myself, if I were to, broadly speaking, I would say that I am more of a right-wing libertarian, but I am a little bit more left-leaning on some social issues. But of course, that's what we'll get into and what we'll talk about a little bit more in depth later in the video. But if I was to classify myself broadly, that's probably what I would say. Just for me personally, I know me and Matt align pretty similarly in terms of the way we think politically.
Yeah, no, there's only a select few issues that we disagree, and even then, it's just slight disagreements on minute details. But yeah, so do you want to get started on some of our just brief topics, just to give our stances on, or do you want to cover something else?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'd first like to say we haven't thought of like a schedule about when we're going to be having these podcasts regularly. But we will in the future have like a routine where, every, I don't know, just for example, Friday we come out with one. But aside from that, let's just jump right into the issues here.
Yeah, so speaking for myself, gun rights,
Is that the first one we're doing?
Let's start with gun rights, just in the list. So starting with gun rights, I'm a strong supporter of the Second Amendment. I guess most regulation that comes around it, I usually don't agree with it, but I would be open to hearing new pieces of legislation being promoted. A lot of stuff being talked about right now, like assault weapons bans, I don't usually support, but Mango, what's your take?
Yeah, so I do support the Second Amendment, and my big reason for supporting it, I've never really liked the argument that, oh, it's to protect ourselves from government tyranny. I'm like, okay, like, sure, but for me, I don't really see something like that really that super possible, super likely, to the point where I would use that as a justification. I see personal self-defense as an incredibly strong reason for it, and I think that alone is prevalent enough to justify believing in the Second Amendment, believing in the right to carry, the right to protect yourself, your home, your property, the right really to protect your life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, as stated in the Declaration of Independence. But yeah, so you talk about assault weapons bans. I'm not a fan of that just because of the contradiction between the different categories. Like, does putting a pistol grip on a gun really turn it into something that should be illegal, right? It functions the same way.
Yeah.
You're holding a grip differently, right? So I don't think that something like an assault weapons ban would be effective. But yeah, just my stance on guns. I generally speaking believe in less regulation. Obviously, we want some background checks, right?
Yeah.
No one, even the NRA, right, the most strong gun supporters will tell you that yes, there should be some restrictions and some process you have to go through to make sure you're fit to own a gun, right?
Yeah, no, so I pretty much agree with everything you said, and then like just to just to show that we do have some differences in the way we believe. One of my strong reasons in supporting the Second Amendment is against possible government tyranny. I know Mangle, he doesn't see that future where that's happening, but I do use that as one of my justifications. I do also support the justification of self-defense against intruders, and obviously that's a more likely situation, but I think they're both equally as important. But so yeah, that's just one way we disagree. While the belief is the same, the way why we believe that is slightly different. Yeah. So, but moving on to our next topic, let's talk about abortion. Why don't you give your stance first?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I used to be very pro-life, and I remember or very pro-choice, sorry. And I remember it was like freshman year, me and you debated because you were pro-life
Uh,
and I was pro-choice, and we were arguing about it. And I was, giving all the typical liberal arguments, like you want to force a woman to have this,
mhm.
what if she can't afford it, things like that. She's not ready. And then I remember we kind of did a total flip-flop, and like half a year later, you were pro-choice and I was pro-life,
Yeah.
and I was and you were saying, well, what if the kid has a bad life, and
Mhm.
pretty common arguments that the left makes. Um, so I'd say my switch has come really when I just kind of thought about it more. So if I'm going to give my stance on abortion, I would say I am pro-life for the most part. I believe in cases such as rape or incest, while or the mother's life being in danger. Well, the situation doesn't necessarily change the morality of the abortion. I still think that in those cases, women should be able to, because they were not pregnant, because they were irresponsible. Their life might be in danger. Things like that, I think, can be exceptions. But for the vast majority of abortions, where it's just people being irresponsible and something happens, I don't support abortion in those cases. One thing I've been a little bit more lenient on recently, actually, is first trimester abortions, or like abortions where you all you do is take a pill, right? Because the different forms of abortions, the earliest one you can take a pill, which kind of stops further development,
Mhm.
and then the next one would be with a suction catheter, and then after that you get into some of the more gruesome abortions that I absolutely would not support. But I've been kind of struggling with myself, thinking like, okay, like if someone just takes a pill and it stops future tissue development, like it's that early on in the stage, I'm still kind of wondering with myself for that situation. But as a general rule, I do believe that abortion is wrong morally, and that it should not be widely available legally.
Yeah. So I'm somewhat in a similar stance. I am pro life at this point, and one difference is the only time I believe that an abortion is acceptable is when the mother's life is in danger. That's just a personal opinion. We could make an entire video about this because it's such an important issue, such a broad issue. It's not a clear cut
So
issue.
many
Yeah,
nuances.
there's so many different situations that need to be talked about, but just a plain and simple version of it is I'm pro life. The only time I support abortion is when it's to protect the mother's life, or if there's multiple babies involved, because I know multiple babies being blank on the word right, but when there's multiple babies, there's chances that it might kill the other babies if one of them's not aborted, because it.
So how does that make sense? You're not okay with aborting one fetus, but if it's
Mm,
three fetuses, then you can kill. I mean, you're killing more life in that situation just based on
no,
the
I'm saying
chance that something might happen.
no, because that's usually those two situations are correlated when there's more than like, I think it's like four. It puts the mother's life at risk. So that's why
Okay.
at that point, that's what
Right.
I'm talking about.
Okay.
I didn't.
So you're not just talking about like twins
No,
or
no, not
triplets,
twins and
right?
no,
Or
not at all.
more
Yeah, no,
common.
no.
You're talking about like the really
The really
weird
extreme cases, yeah.
mutate.
That's
Yeah.
important
Okay.
clarification. Yeah,
All right.
yeah. And then why don't we move on to our next topic? Let's talk about fiscal policy. We can kind of just glance over this one. This is pretty simple. You wanna start this time?
Yeah. So generally speaking, because I am a libertarian, I would say I support as minimal government regulation as necessary. Now, libertarians is this meme that we want no government, none, just zero control from them. But I don't really know anyone that believes that. I don't even think the Libertarian Party platform believes that. We obviously believe there are some things the government should do, like protect life, liberty, and property. However, when it comes to fiscal policy, so things like taxes, I'm generally believe in lower tax rates across the board, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then stimulus spending, not a big fan of that. And again, like you said, on a lot of these topics, we could spend an hour talking about these all in a separate thing. But just for this, just so I give my stance on each thing. Yeah, subsidies. From what I see, some seem good, but generally, I don't know. I don't have a strong opinion when it comes to subsidies. Bailouts are another thing that I'm not a big fan of, but I do see some usefulness in them in situations like the 2008 or 2009 recession, whatever year you want to place it in. I think that bailouts of the banks weren't necessary because they were too big to fail. And again, we could talk about this forever, but that's just my basic stance. If I were to give you a in favor or not in favor, and kind of why.
I'm pretty much in the same boat. I'm usually more of an Austrian thinker. That's just pretty much all the time. Just one little difference between me and Jake. He does, like he said, he doesn't. You said you didn't quite believe in subsidies, right? But you weren't entirely sure on the issues. Isn't that what you said?
Well, what I said is that when I look at subsidies, right, I think the government shouldn't stop subsidies or end subsidies because I don't think they're all bad. I think the government needs to refocus who they're giving their subsidies to.
Okay.
Look at the results and the outcomes of what those subsidies produce in order to decide, okay, is giving subsidies to this industry harmful, or does it help keep prices low and available? Like farming subsidies, I don't know a ton about it, but that's one where I know that if the government gives them subsidies, which they do, I believe they're still one of the largest, if not the largest receiver of subsidies. They are the largest in the country, and I understand that allows them to keep the price of milk lower, at least to my knowledge. But yeah, so that's just something that I need to do more research. I'm never gonna pretend that I know, or I'm not ever going to take a strong stance on something that I don't know a lot about.
Yeah.
I'm very upfront if I don't know something. There's a lot of environmental stuff I don't know, which is why when it comes to the environment, I'm probably a little bit more left leaning than your average conservative would be. But yeah, so that's my basic stance on subsidies. Just to clarify your question.
Yeah, I just want to make sure. All right, so yeah, we're pretty much in the same boat then. So let's move on to healthcare. I am not a fan of the single payer system that's been proposed a lot. A lot of people point towards Canada, towards what they have there. I know Jim Carrey spent his time on Bill Maher talking a lot about that he never had to wait in at all for his healthcare, but I just don't support it. I mean, there's research been done that shows that they have some of the highest wait times in the world. I mean, there was an entire one of their I forget which court it is in Canada, but one of their high courts, I believe, said it was a crime against humanity or something like that because the wait times were so long because people were dying because they had to use this system, if I remember correctly. So yeah, I'm not a fan of single payer healthcare at all. Strong believer in the privatization of healthcare. What is your take?
Yeah, I'm actually in a public speaking class right now, and I wrote my final for the trimester, my paper on universal healthcare. So I'm giving that speech on Monday. But yeah, healthcare is not a right. Universal healthcare is a bad idea for economic reasons, for humanitarian reasons, and for purposes of reducing innovation. I think it's something that isn't talked a lot about, but creating new medicines is a very profitable industry, and when you take away that profit motive, it can hurt innovation. And we all want new cures, so that's one take I have on it. But yeah, overall, healthcare is not a right; it's a commodity, and universal healthcare is a bad idea.
Alrighty, so moving on to our next topic, we need to talk about military spending or immigration. Which one would you like to talk about next?
I don't have the strongest stances on either one. I would say maybe let's go with military spending.
Okay.
Why not?
Mm-hmm. You wanna elaborate on that?
Yeah, sure. So another area where I don't think I would fall perfectly in line with what typical conservatives believe. I don't necessarily believe in strong global intervention or fighting wars to protect American interests. Off in the Middle East. Not a big fan of war in general. But overall, I would say that I wouldn't have a problem with, either stagnating the military budget, meaning, I believe that means not increasing it, or reducing it even. I would be open to, just because we outspend every single country in terms of our military spending, even when you combine the other top 10, right? So I just think we spend too much, and we don't need necessarily as much money going into military funding. I know you probably disagree a little bit with me on that, though.
Well, I can see possibly cutting it slightly, but when I think libertarian, I think that there's only I believe in a small government, but I do think there's certain areas where government has to be strong, and I think there's very few of those, and I think we have way too many areas where the government has a strong influence. However, I do believe one of the main functions of our government should be military. So I think a large portion of the tax revenue that's collected should go towards that, because personally I believe that's one of the areas that the government is supposed to handle. That's one of the areas where I believe we do have a strong government, and I don't usually say that, but that's just one of the very few areas where I believe that's why I believe we have a government, is to take care of military issues. And I think that's why I could see possibly cutting, because we do spend quite a bit on it. Like as you said, the next 11 countries combined don't even compare to us.
The next nine, but yeah,
the next 9,
maybe more.
Yeah,
but you get the point.
Yeah, no, I get. Yeah, so yeah, I could see possibly cutting it slightly, but nothing too major. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not talking slash in half. I think if you did decrease it, it would have to be something gradual and minute, just so you don't have a stark 180 of funding towards the military. But yeah, I don't know. I don't have super strong opinions on it.
Is there any other areas you would like to talk about before we move on?
I think our next topic was immigration?
Sure, yeah, we can talk about immigration.
Yeah, so immigration. So I don't know anyone that opposes legal immigration. Everyone really encourages it. I think that immigrants have built what our country is today, and I think that immigration is wonderful. I love meeting people that come from all different cultures. It's really interesting to see different backgrounds and hear about it and stuff like that. Where I do have a problem is with illegal immigration. Now, generally speaking, I don't think you should be able to come here legally and stay here. I'm not a big fan of the birthright thing that Trump's been talking about a little bit. However, the way that I see the Constitution, it does cover that in it. So I don't think there's any way to change that. So I wouldn't necessarily want to change that. But just generally, I don't think that illegal immigration should be supported or encouraged, as I think it is, by the Democratic Party. Just from the kind of rhetoric I hear from them, abolish ICE, right? Let everyone in, things like that. Just that kind of radical ideas revolving around illegal immigration. I'm not a big fan of. I think it undermines the people that worked extremely hard and waited several years to get their citizenship and are now working hard in America for someone to skip the line and jump over and then, not have to pay the same taxes. They don't have a social security number, at least a legal one. So often they're not even driving legally. So, there's just a bunch of problems for me. So I think illegal immigration is a problem, but I wouldn't classify it as a crisis or a major problem as I think Donald Trump probably would.
I didn't really disagree with anything there, so I don't want to repeat. I don't want to sound repetitive, so I'm just going to say, yep, that's pretty much my stance too. So let's keep this train moving. So is there any other issues you want to talk about?
Well, you have the list, so just read off.
Well, the only one we haven't talked about yet is marriage, but do you want to talk about marriage?
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, there's this, stereotype I think would best describe it that Republicans hate the gays and they're against gay marriage, and a lot of that is nonsense. Yes, there are a lot of, Catholic conservatives that are because of their religion, but outside of religious affiliation, there really isn't a good argument against gay marriage, right?
Hmm.
That you can make societally or anything like that. I'm not a very religious person. I don't have a problem with gay people. I think gay marriage should be illegal. Um, I think they should have the same treatment as anyone else. So I don't see a problem with, who you're gonna marry. That's none of my business. A libertarian stance too is the government shouldn't be telling me who and who I can't marry, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's a big part of my argument is why what the government shouldn't have that power in your life, right? To tell you who you can and can't love, So that's my stance on it. Um, and I would assume yours is pretty
Yeah, no,
similar.
same. I basically come from the same point of view. I, I'm guessing I'm probably a little bit more religious than you are, just from what you said. I know you're not the most religious person, but I like to think of myself as like a more religious person. But yeah, I would have to say I don't think it's the government's job to be involved in marriage. I think people should be able to marry whoever they want to. I think that's the right as an American citizen, and I don't see why the government should be telling people. So yeah, I really have no problem with it. Yeah, so we've covered all the topic.
So
Oh, you have something?
would would you say you're Catholic then or
No, I'm not Catholic. I'm Lutheran.
Lutheran? Okay,
Mm,
yeah, I was baptized Lutheran,
okay.
but I don't know,
Yeah.
never really go to church. Don't hold strong beliefs about anything like that. But yeah, so that's all the topics through there. See, one thing we didn't actually talk about is our stance on environmental issues,
Mhm.
which I feel like is a big one, where there's lots of divide. So I guess I would ask you just to explain topics like climate change, solar energy, environment, just your broad stance, kind of like with healthcare we talked about. Is it a right? The
Yeah.
economic problems, the social problem. Kind of just expand on everything in your opinion on the environment.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna say this is an area that I'm super well informed on. I've done research on it, but I mean, it's there's so much research on the like environmental issues that it's kind of hard to like. I see a lot of people cherry picking data to try and prove their point, and it's really hard to find super unbiased because pretty much everyone has a bias, especially with environmental issues. But I have a lot of problems with a lot of the arguments being made on both sides. Uh like obviously the climate is changing. We are heating up, and the debate. I'm sure the debate. I think the debate where it is right now is what's causing it and what can we do? Should we do something to prevent it? And if so, what is that change that we need to
Exactly.
make?
Hmm.
Like for example, I see a lot of times people on the right pointing towards certain articles saying that like I know NASA published a study saying that we aren't necessarily losing ice, just the amount we gain every year is decreasing. But I've also seen NASA studies that say we are losing ice on a yearly basis. So it's just
Hmm.
because there's different researchers at NASA that come to different conclusions, and those conclusions are published. So for
Right.
me, it's hard for me to figure out. I'm not an environmental scientist, but if I had to say, I acknowledge that climate change exists. I by no means say that I know what causes it or what's the best way to fix it or even should we fix it. So yeah, that's just my point of view. What's yours?
Right. Yeah. It's impossible to that climate change exists in the sense that the climate is changing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's just impossible to deny. The statistics show it. You mentioned cherry picking. I find it a little ironic just because I've heard you a lot of the times bring up that NASA study,
Yeah,
right? And I think using that to kind of attempt to not necessarily debunk, but kind of refute or say like, okay, maybe we don't know. I feel like that in itself is kind of cherry
no,
picking
it is. That's why.
because
Yeah, no, for sure, it is cherry picking. That's why, because I've seen that study, but I've also seen studies from NASA saying like we are losing ice. That's why I'm saying like I see people on the right do
right.
that. I've brought that up in conversations because a lot of people don't even a lot of people, especially on the left, who you like talk about environmental issues, they only look for the type of research that states we're losing ice. And I'm not saying that I know which one of those two studies is right. I'm just trying to, when I use that article, I'm less trying to prove a side than I'm trying to prove that there is more than one side to the climate change debate.
Okay. So what about if we kind of stay under the topic of environment, but move slightly into the topic of not solar energy, just solar energy, but renewable energy, clean energy in general. Do you think that, this sort of clean, sustainable energy that we're told about is feasible? Not necessarily right now, but in the future, maybe along the way as the technology develops. What are your thoughts on, I guess, clean energy, mainly solar, wind?
Yeah.
Energy
So, where we live, I don't see wind as a strong possibility because.
Really?
Yeah. No.
I feel like it's a tundra sometimes when I walk up.
No, just it's not super. I mean, they're.
I know.
Yeah, no, they're super they're super expensive to build, and honestly, right now, just in Minnesota, like we don't, because we live in Minnesota, so we don't really have the year-round wind to to make it reasonable. And with solar, my big issue is they're just not that efficient yet. I see a future where they become more efficient, but
they're expensive.
It's expensive.
That's another problem.
I've seen studies saying that the most efficient solar panels are only 22.2% efficient, which is not even comparable to other sources of energy. Yeah. So right now, I don't see a feasible use of them on a mass scale. I think we'll see further improvements throughout time, but from the research I've done, I'm a strong believer in nuclear energy. I think that's where the future is heading currently, just because of how inefficient some other power sources are. And I'm also a fan of hydropower. I think that's an interesting topic, because it's hard in certain areas where there's not a lot of water. But from what I understand, it's more. I know it's more efficient than solar. I don't remember the exact number of how, the exact percentage of how efficient it is. But yeah, so I'm not a big fan of solar and wind in its current state, but I think there's interesting possibilities in the future. And I think right now, the direction we're heading, I think we're going to see a shift towards more nuclear, talks about more nuclear power plants and more hydropower, because I think both those industries we'll see more talk about in the coming years.
Yeah, you mentioned how there's, it's not really a reliable source. That's why in the entire world currently there is not a single standing or proposed standing purely clean energy power plant. Every single one requires a backup, which is fossil fuel, right?
Yeah.
Almost always fossil fuel. And then it's not reliable. Another part that ties into that is Germany, for example, is the world leader right now in clean renewable energy uses in terms of the total amount of energy from Germany that comes from clean energy. And it still makes up a tiny percentage of their entire thing, because what ends up happening is that in the winter months of Germany, the sun's not out as much or wind is inconsistent. And so what Germany has to do is they use a backup, which for them it's coal, just, based on their resources. And so what happens is they're constantly having to cycle from solar to coal to wind to coal to solar, right? So they're going through this cycle, and going through that cycle is extremely expensive. So this term has started in Germany now. It's called energy poverty. And it's a term used that, common people would be able to talk to each other about. And it's where people either are struggling to afford or they simply can't afford their energy bills because it is so costly. And so right now, that's the problem with solar. If they get more efficient and cheaper, then I think that'd be great. But I mean, think of also to build a solar panel. You have to mine all the materials, refine them, process them in a factory, and then put it together. That process takes an incredible amount of energy, right? And right now, clean energy just can't do it as as efficiently as fossil fuel. Another problem is you can't store sunlight the same way you can store oil in a tank or coal, in storage. So it also takes a lot more energy to concentrate sun, right, compared to concentrating gasoline, if that makes sense. So overall, it's just more expensive, less efficient. If they're able to change that in the future, then yeah, I'd be open. But right now, our best bet is using fossil fuels for the time being.
Yeah, I think within the next 10 to 15 years, I think we're going to see a big push towards some renewable resources, but I just don't think in current times we're quite there where we can fully commit to certain renewable energy sources, just because they're not efficient. A lot of them are super expensive. So yeah, I pretty much agree with everything you said. So I have a question for you. Do you think in the next, because we're talking about the environment, do you think in the next 10, 15 years we're going to see a big push towards electric cars like Teslas? I know a lot of companies are completely rebranding, moving towards electric cars. And do you think we're going to see a big push towards this?
Well, I think we already are seeing a big. I don't necessarily know what you mean by push.
Well, just
you're referring to politically or culturally, or
because obviously Tesla's very big right now. A lot of people are talking about Tesla.
Yeah,
all their cars are fully electric. So I know there's several car manufacturers looking into building fully electric models. Do you think we're gonna see a cultural push towards these electric cars because of the talk about climate change?
Yeah. So I think we will see a push, whether or not that actually changes anything, and whether or not not solar powered, but electric clean cars become the new norm. I really doubt that we're gonna see that in the next 10 years. Okay. For me, that just seems too soon. But I definitely think we're gonna see clean cars grow in popularity, especially as the technology develops and as it gets cheaper, for sure. Which it undoubtedly will, just because of innovation advancements and things like that, and in competition. But so will we see a push for it? Sure. Will there be an outcome? I don't think so.
Okay. Continue.
I think a topic that we could talk about now, though, that would be interesting to listen to would be LGBT issues, because I know me and you just went to a social justice club meeting, which we attend every once in a while, just to not to be rude. We don't ever want to be rude or mean to anybody. We honestly go to just listen and listen and hear things. I'm seeing a comment right now in the thing that says thoughts on the Jim Acosta / CNN versus Trump situation. Do we want to talk about that quickly, and then we can switch over to gender issues?
Yeah. So as some of you may or may not know, as of today, there was a court ruling that, or was it as of yesterday? Well, anyway, recently there was a court ruling stating that the White House had to give back his White House credentials. But so I believe that, from what I understand, I believe that it makes sense that he should have his credentials back. I don't really see. I saw the video. I can see where some people might have thought he pushed her, but I thought.
So why don't you explain? Why don't you explain for people watching? Because I know even for me personally, I don't know a ton about this. Can you kind of explain what happened?
And
then talk about your opinion.
Just from where I saw the video, just from what I saw from the video was that he was somewhat aggressive, but I didn't really see him pushing her. So
we'll set up the context of the video, because I know some people are gonna have no idea what you're talking about when you say keep someone. What happened?
So essentially, Jim Acosta, he was asking questions. President Trump asked him, I believe, to he asked a couple questions, and he just kept asking questions. President Trump asked him to move along to the next person who was supposed to ask questions, but he kept repeating himself, making it very clear that he did not want to give up. So I don't know if it was an intern, but a female came over and tried to take the microphone away from him, and Jim Acosta was somewhat aggressive about it, but I don't think he pushed her. I don't think that was his intent to do so.
So is the controversy that people think he shoved her?
The controversy is, I believe it's moving. In the beginning, that's what it was really focused on, but I think it's becoming more and more clear that he didn't push her. So,
but I'm not asking
no,
did he or didn't he? Is that what the controversy?
That's what
is
the controversy originally was. But then it came down. Then it came down to should the president be able to deny certain news outlets their ability to cover
or to ask
questions. And I think I pretty much, from what I know, I pretty much agree with the court ruling that he should be given his permissions back because he wasn't really aggressive. And under a free press, I think that no matter your political affiliation, you should be able to be present. I do, however, believe that if President Trump never wants to allow another question from Jim Acosta, I don't think he ever has to. But I think he should be at least be allowed to be there and hear statements from Sarah Huckabee Sanders or President Trump, whoever's speaking.
So just to clarify, you are not agreeing with Trump in this situation?
I'm not agreeing with Trump in this situation. I think Jim Acosta should be given his permissions back. I can see why President Trump did it originally because it did seem somewhat aggressive. And I can see if that was the reasoning behind it. I think it should have been he probably should have been removed in that situation. I don't think his permission should have been revoked, but I think he probably should have been removed from the room because he was acting somewhat aggressively.
All right, that's fair. Hopefully that answered that question a little bit. I'm sorry, I don't know a ton about that situation. I haven't been keeping up with the news the past few days. But now moving on to gender issues, LGBT issues. Matthew Pastrana, how many genders are there?
There are 2, unfortunately. Well, fortunately, actually. I don't know why I said unfortunately.
All right, so yeah, like I said, we were at this LGBT thing, and one of the big things they talked about was when you meet somebody or you're introducing yourself to somebody, ask them for their pronouns, or, like if I'm meeting you, Pastrana, I would say, hi, my name is Jake. My pronouns are he, his, and him. I personally think it's kind of silly, but, the argument that, why should I have to go out of my way? Is it really that, that much out of your way? What do you think about the whole using your pronouns thing, whether it's introducing yourself or just using
So I don't see myself ever asking someone what their pronouns are. Just it doesn't for like 99% of people you can just kind of tell. That's just because I can kind of tell you're a male. I can assume that.
Oh.
But
however, the gender activists would disagree.
Yeah,
they would say no way to assume. But
yeah, and I don't. If a gender activist asked me what my pronouns were, I wouldn't care. Like I don't care if they ask people what their pronouns are. That doesn't mean I have to do it. And I really don't care if people start asking each other what their pronouns are, because as long as I don't have to do it, I'm completely fine with people doing it. And if someone asked me to use a different pronoun than what I assumed they were, I would probably do it out of a sense of respect of that person. Mm-hmm. And as long as it was like mutual respect in like discussion, I would be completely fine with it. But however, the issue for me is when gender activists start talking about regulating it, so you have to use these pronouns. You have to acknowledge that person is the gender they are saying, because that's a clear infringement on the First Amendment, and I don't see why we should ever infringe on the First Amendment in any circumstances, because that's how we feel free to express these ideas. Because there's a time where if we didn't have the First Amendment, this issue may never even been allowed to talked about.
Right. So it seems like, and I would agree with you, we don't really have a problem with the social implications of, respecting pronouns. But where we do have a problem is with the legal restrictions that are being proposed. One of the things that I hear trans people talking about, I should say the trans movement, or when we went to the meeting, I heard a lot about how, this movement is just extremely accepting about everyone. They're extremely tolerant. To me, the trans activists, I'm not saying everybody who's a member of the LGBT community. I'm saying a lot of their leaders are the most authoritarian, least accepting people that I've ever seen. They're proposing things like throwing you in jail for misgendering someone. Is that really tolerant and accepting? Or, you know, they're tolerant and accepting, except they want to force religious bakers to bake cakes.
I'm sorry, but brief interruption. I was just informed that I am obliged to give a shout out to Chris Montgomery as my site sourced for why there are only two genders. I do make that clear. That's my source. So yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it was made very clear that if I didn't interrupt you, I would be in serious trouble. So continue.
All right, yeah. But yeah, no, that's my only problem is that it's really not a tolerant movement. It's tolerant to whoever they want to be tolerant to, which that's not the definition of tolerant, right?
Mm-hmm.
The definition of tolerant isn't, okay, I'm going to handpick who I'm nice to. The definition of tolerant is I tolerate things even when I disagree with them. And the LGBT community activists are, in my opinion, the last group to hold that principle, truly hold that principle when it comes to all groups, right? That's why you're saying, you know, love and acceptance, we must tolerate everyone, all are welcome. And then you're seeing, you know, Chick-fil-A be called this evil group for their owner supporting traditional marriage or things like that, you know. And you know, I'm not going to, you know, bend over and cry about something as little as that, but it's the hypocrisy and the double standard that really frustrates me within the LGBT community. They're one of the most authoritarian groups, I think, in America, because they demand, if you do not abide by their societal norms, you know, if you misgender people, like I said, you should be thrown in jail because of hate speech. Right. And I'm not trying to group in everybody who's trans or gay in this. I'm talking specifically about their leaders. And unfortunately, I think their leaders are extremely radical. And I think that hurts the group because it turns away moderates like us who are like, sure, we'll respect your pronouns, but you're suggesting that we have to, or else we're charged with hate speech. Like,
and even moderates like us do believe that there are, at least I believe that there are some important issues within that community that do have to be talked about, like, for example, I know when we were at Social Justice Club, they talked about conversion therapy still being legal in some states, and there's an entire debate to be had about that. But I think, especially for minors, it should not be legal anywhere in the country, just because there is a high suicide rate that goes along with that. So, and I think any treatment that like ends up in such a high suicide rate, I don't see how that can be a treatment. I see that as, so I as moderates, when you start making like such extreme, when the gender activists start making such extreme claims, it pushes us away from a community that we could be trying to help with issues that are more moderate, like getting rid of conversion therapy and issues like that.
Yeah, and even on social grounds, like we talked about.
Yeah.
Most people, if you ask them, hey, you know, can you call me, you know, he or she and her rather than he, him, even though biologically I am a male, I really do feel like I am a woman. I think most people, just out of common decency, would say, you know, I might not agree with that, but, you know, I'll be a respectful person and I'll call you that. So yeah, I don't think we have a problem with that. It's just the legal demands that are a problem. I'm trying to think of other things they talked about. Oh yeah. One thing that is extremely overlooked, and I think the left has really failed on this issue, because the left is all about seeking justice for the little guy, right? You know, helping gay people that are oppressed, helping minorities that are oppressed, refugees that are oppressed, all this helping people that are oppressed. And they're perfectly willing to attack Christianity, attack the Bible. You know, they'll still get upset about an abortion shooting that happened, you know, over a decade ago or something like that. But then whenever the topic of Islamic treatment of, say, women, or in this case, gays, is brought up, they go silent, right? And in some instances, we even see like big Muslim activists in favor of things like Sharia law giving speeches at these gay rallies, and it's like, okay, how does that work? Because I think there are something like 12 countries right now where it is legal to be put to death for being gay.
Yeah.
every single one of them is Muslim. And when I say that, I'm referring to theocracy, right?
Mm.
All of those Islam countries' laws are based in Islamic text. So it's not a secular issue. It is directly tied into the teachings, unfortunately, written into the Quran. And whereas for Christians, you've seen, um, reformations over time where we've said, okay, these things are okay, these things are not okay, right? Even though, and I don't agree with this, the Bible says gays are going to hell, right? We still treat everyone with love and respect. Those in other religions. Islam hasn't had that.
Yeah, and I don't remember last year at our school we have something called Justice Week every year, which is put on by the Social Justice Club. And last year it was about the religion of Islam and
Bridging the divide.
Yeah. Which, okay, there can be an argument to be had about that. That obviously we should respect each other's viewpoints. It's a good.
I think it's a fantastic.
No, it's a fantastic.
Idea.
However, I think especially the left, it's taking some of the reasoning behind their arguments. I think it's completely misguided, because I remember at social, during one of the presentations they gave throughout the week, do you remember they talked about like they brought up like Bible verses in the Bible. Like, they brought up Bible verses and compared them to verses from the Quran. It's just like the Bible's bad, so the Quran is bad. Like they were kind of the Quran has flaws, but so does the Bible, so that makes it okay. Like they were using a weird.
It's the same thing, if I may interject. It's the same thing as when someone says Donald Trump is a bad candidate. And I say, yeah, well, Hillary's bad.
Yeah.
Hillary's done all these bad things. Okay, why are we all of a sudden talking about Hillary?
Yeah.
Right, we can talk about Hillary, but that's not a good defense for why Donald Trump is not bad.
Yeah, no,
right?
Yeah.
Both things can be bad.
But
right?
Yeah, but I
agree. The teachings in Islam and a lot of teachings in Christianity are both bad.
I don't know if I'd go that far, but and also they had this idea that the majority of conservatives believe that Islam is filled with terrorists. So they kept making the argument that Islam is not a majority of terrorists, which I don't believe. I don't believe that's true, and I think they misunderstand what conservatives often are trying to say. I think a lot of conservatives are trying to say that the majority of Islamic people are radical. And this can be seen through studies such as Pew Research, what I've opened right now, where obviously most people in the United States will agree that Sharia law is objectively wrong. It's just there's so many things within it that are just objectively wrong that if people read it, they would never agree with that. But when we see countries such as Niger, which 86% of the people there support Sharia law, and just all these countries on the other side of the world where the majority of Islamic people believe in Sharia law, it's just the left thinks that conservatives are trying to say that the majority of Muslims are terrorists, which is that's simply not true. But that's not to say that the majority of them aren't radicals. At least that's the way I see it. Do you have any opinions on that?
Yeah, so one of the big things that they talked about last year in Social Justice Week, and one of the common talking points of the left is, well, only 1% of Muslims actually commit terrorism. First of all, 1% of Muslims is a lot of people, just because of the pure sample size. But obviously, that's such a tiny minority. But what we should be focused on shouldn't be how many commit terrorism. It should be how many believe in the ideas that fuel terrorism.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
These radical beliefs. And when you look at those statistics, using the same source that gives that 1% statistic, we find that, like you said, in some countries, it's as high as 98% of Muslims supporting strict Sharia law, supporting honor killings of women, supporting, even supporting groups like the Taliban and ISIS, or things like that, or saying suicide bombings can sometimes be justified. So those are the statistics we should be looking at, because that refers to who is radical.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Not
and
the 1%.
Actually,
right? It's just not a compelling argument.
Yeah, and this article is actually what was one of the biggest ironies of one of their presentations, because they used this exact article for, I believe they used it as one of their sources for the amount of Islamic people in the world, and they were using this exact article which shows that the majority of Islamic people are have more radical beliefs, and that's
Are you talking about Pew Research?
Because if you remember, during one of the presentations, they used this exact Pew Research study as one of their
for the 1% thing. They use Pew Research,
and that's obviously very like that's something that happened at our school, but that just shows some of like the hypocrisy that happens where they're cherry picking research within a certain study. They're not even cherry picking certain studies. They're cherry picking some of the information within that study.
They're not cherry picking research per se, I don't think, but I think they're using the wrong statistics. I think they think that proves something that it really doesn't. Right? How many people act upon terrorism and how many people support it are two very different things. Right? So I think they're just using the wrong statistic. I don't think they're, looking through all this data and they find one point and they're like, okay, we'll go with that one. Right? I think they see that and they think that proves a point that it really doesn't.
Yeah.
Because it just doesn't refer to how many are radicalized. It just refers to how many actually commit crimes in the act of Islam.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I would say that's probably a better way to word it. You got what I was trying to get. You got what I was trying to say, I should say. Yeah.
Yeah. No, but and I think another problem, and for those watching, something we need to understand, something that really hurts the debate about Islam, we need to stop conflating criticism of ideology with attacking of people, right? When I criticize Islam, I am not criticizing Muslims. I am not saying Muslims are bad people. I am attacking the ideology, just like I attack Catholicism a lot.
Yeah.
Because I disagree with a lot of it. I am not saying Catholics are bad people. I am attacking the ideology, right? And the principles of the ideology, or the texts of the ideology, the doctrine of the ideology, the practices, all those different things. We need to stop conflating criticism of ideas with criticism of people. And I feel like the left conflates the two, and that's where they come up with this "you're being racist" thing. It's not racist if I'm talking about ideas. It is if I'm talking about people, right?
Yeah. I'm sorry. Someone just mentioned Mr. Kleiss in the comment section. It got to me a little bit. I'm sorry. All right. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. See that there.
Yeah. Yeah. Now I completely lost my train. Yeah, but yeah, I agree. It's not an attack on the people. It's an attack on the ideology. It's not even. We're criticizing the ideology because some parts of it are just objectively wrong. Just the majority of people, if people were given no context on what some of the beliefs of Islam has, they would say that's objectively wrong. They might not know that it's from Islam, but they would say it's objectively wrong.
Same thing with some text from the Bible too. I mean, every religion has texts that are bad, but again, going back to the Reformation, I think Islam needs a sort of Reformation so that we can create this kind of moderate Islam that we all want, right? So
my question for you is, because the way Islam is currently is, it's a very oppressive religion. That's one of the reasons why we disagree with it. Right? Do you agree with me so far? It's an oppressive religion.
In terms of what the Quran says and what their theocracy is put into place, absolutely. I think it's impossible to argue it's not an oppressive religion. Sharia law at its core is subversion and oppression.
So, if under the basis that it's such an oppressive religion, do you think it's even possible for a reformation to occur if new ideas within the religion are just so oppressed? Do you ever see a time where we will see a reformation within the religion of Islam?
Yes, I absolutely do. Now, I don't think that we're gonna see it like that. I don't think it's gonna be like a light switch flips and all of a sudden there's this moderate Islam, but I think that it will take time, and I think that what will cause that reformation is Muslims inside the Muslim community speaking out. Unfortunately, in other countries, a lot of times that's illegal to do.
Yeah.
And punishments involve death, right? So that's another problem. But I think we'll see a reformation. I think that if Catholicism has reformed so extensive as it has, obviously, throughout human history, going all the way back to the Protestant Reformations, I think that we could see a similar thing, and I think that we will see a similar thing eventually. I only think you can ignore these extreme human right violations for so long before you have no choice but to put it at the forefront of issues and start a discussion, right? Which is what I think would be the first key part of starting a reformation.
Okay, yeah. Are there any other issues you would like to discuss?
We've been going for about an hour. I think we covered everything. Again, the main point of this video was just to kind of lay down our beliefs on all the different issues, just to kind of give anyone watching kind of an idea of what we believe, make sure there aren't any misconceptions. Just because we're Republican, we believe this or this. We kind of vary on different things, but I think overall that kind of sums up everything. I know we went, a little more into detail on certain things, but for anyone watching.
Wait, so before
in the future,
before you finish, let's finish up like our closing stuff, and then if anybody that's watching right now wants to like ask a question, why don't we like have them ask questions? Just because of the delay. So if anyone has a question, they can like they can ask it right now, and then we can finish up our closing stuff. How about that?
Yeah, for sure. If you have a question, go ahead. I know we've gotten a few throughout this.
Yeah.
A few comments and questions as well.
Yeah, so just finishing up, I mean, if there's any areas you think we should cover more, or even if you have a differing opinion than us, you can let us know. You can maybe even come up on the Gen Z podcast. So let us know any feedback you guys have. And then if you have any ideas of what you would like to see in the future, just drop a comment down below so we can see those, because that will help us know what you guys would like us to produce, so what we know what topics. So yeah, do you have any other closing stuff?
Basically, as you mentioned, having other people on is going to be a big part. We won't, every single week, but that is a fun thing to do, is to talk to people you disagree with. This isn't meant to be like, oh, let's have a fist fight debate where we try to wreck the liberal or the conservative if they come on and we happen to disagree. This is really a place where we can just have discussions and be able to talk about certain issues. So if you do, hold a different belief, or even if you agree with us and you want to talk about a certain issue that you are passionate about, or that you know a lot about, or that maybe you don't know a lot about and you want to learn more, then let us know and we would be happy. Just reach out to us. My Twitter handle. I don't ever use my Twitter handle.
In the description.
Yeah. I don't.
But to answer the question, do we have anything better to do on a Friday night? The answer is no. The only thing else I could be doing right now is probably playing Fortnite. So.
Oh God! Stop talking.
So yeah. So this is pretty much as good as it's gonna get for this Friday night.
All right, yeah. It was actually my brother's birthday tonight, so I was out at dinner.
Yeah, so usually I'm assuming these podcasts won't be this late, just because it is a little bit later at night.
Yeah.
But anything else?
I think that wraps it up. Thanks so much. I know we were right around 7, 8. I think we peaked at 11 or 12 viewers, but we've been right around 7, which is actually kind of cool. So I appreciate anyone that came out and took the time to watch. It was fun getting to read comments as we talk about certain things, and we're doing this because it's just something we love. We love politics. We love talking about it, and it's something we're passionate about, and we want to share our opinions with people just like anyone else would. So thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, make sure to subscribe, turn on notifications so you'll see whenever our podcast goes live. Thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll catch you next time.
Peace.